Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Street Peace Coalition. My name is Johnny Muhammad, and I'm here with my guest, Ernest Muhammad. For those of you who have tuned in with us every week, as you know, the Street Peace Coalition is an organization that of young and older black people who have committed themselves to intervening into conflicts and situations in our neighborhoods and offering our people a better way of resolving their conflicts and issues and discouraging the escalation of violence in our community. It's the goal of the Street Peace Coalition to bring about peace and a better way of dealing with our situation as we struggle and strive here in the United States of America to create a better quality of life for black people. With me is Brother Ernest Muhammad. And first thing we like to do is to invite you, the viewing audience, to connect with us. At the Street Peace Coalition, you can hook up with us on our Facebook page, as well as connect with us on our website, www.streetpeacecoalition.weebly.com. We want to make sure that you have that as a means of being able to reach out to us and get involved in our efforts in the community. One of the things I like to do for this evening's show is to have a personal one-on-one with Brother Ernest Muhammad, who is a member of the Street Peace Coalition. He has worked very closely with organizations and groups, as well as our young people throughout the city, and trying to give them other alternatives to dealing with the situations that they confront that may lead to the escalation of violence and conflict. And he's been a very instrumental person in trying to resolve some of the challenges that we face. So, Brother Ernest, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got involved with the Street Peace Coalition?
Okay. Well, previously, I was very involved in street gang life. Vice Lord from the west side of Chicago. Spent many years keeping up a lot of chaos on the west side. The neighborhood or the area I'm from is Monticello and Augusta, well-known area, with some neighborhood terrorists,
Okay.
I would say. Getting myself in constant trouble and things to that nature, started listening to the message of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad under the leadership of Minister Farrakhan, and that began to turn my life in a different direction.
Question now, did you spend any time in jail?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Quite a bit of time. From prison to the county.
All right. Now,
more,
what kind of effect did that have on you after having that kind of experience?
Well, in the beginning, when I was first going in and out and, selling drugs and things to that nature, it didn't have a effect on me and when I think about it, that it should have, because I was unconcerned about it. I had money to bond out. I had money for a lawyer.
Okay.
And I always had it in my mind that I was going to get out. So every time.
So in other words, it didn't rehabilitate you?
No, sir, not at all.
And what about school? What kind of impact did the schools have on you? I mean, did you take education seriously and really was encouraged to try to be successful in school? Or how was your educational experience?
Early on in life, my educational experience was great. Later in the years, got so busy trying to keep up with my peers and keep up with everything, what everybody was doing, and trying to make sure I smoked weed every period. Because I went to Lincoln Park High School, and we had, I think from like the 3rd to the 7th period, we could go out for lunch, and so most of those periods I was at lunch. So yeah, even though that wasn't my lunch period. So got caught up in that, had to get kicked out of school, had to go back and get a GED and things to that nature. So yeah,
All right, all right.
yeah,
And then you got involved with street organizations.
yeah. I was
Now, what was the attraction there? Because see, this is key to really understanding what street life seems to offer to young people, and why the established educational institutions have not been able to compete with what street life has to offer and offer a better alternative, mainly because the mainstream educational institutions have not really offered a pathway of success. So what did street life offer you that the regular avenues of upward mobility didn't seem to offer?
Well, sometimes we buy into this concept of, you know, we can't make it out of the hood. The hood is our life, and this is big as it gets, and this as far as it goes. And so when we begin to think and believe like that, you know, I mean, coming up in the neighborhood, it was very rare that we even left the immediate area that we hung out in. I mean, today, you know, we could travel from the west side to the south side and the north side, but in my young days, you know, unless we were going to rob somebody or something to that effect, we didn't leave our side of town. We didn't too much venture too far off the blocks that we were familiar with.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and as far as school goes, what happened with me was that I didn't want to be in the gang. But hanging out with my cousins, and I'm 12, 13 years old, hanging out with my cousins, and they all in the gangs or whatever. And I really wasn't interested in, I considered gangs being bullies, because, you know, you got 5 guys jumping on one guy. So I thought that was being a bully. And it kind of made me want to stay away from it until I got jumped on by some gang members, and because I was hanging with my cousins and them, and actually my cousins had got into a fist fight up in the skating rink. I'm up in the rink with them, and we get into a fist fight with some guys, and after I went back, because my mom had moved on the north side in Cabrini Green for a while, and we had saw some guys from the north side, and then nobody in the rink knew who they were. And me not being naive, not knowing that I'm telling these guys that these other guys that were in the rink were GDs from the north side, they got jumped on. So when I went back to the north side, they jumped on me. So I couldn't go back.
Okay.
Yeah, and that kind of sparked my, you know, they accused me of being something, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to be it, you know. And it just spiraled out of control from there.
So from what I gather, now what you said earlier, the reality that you face was shaped by the perception of the environment that you lived in.
Yes, sir.
So for you, your reality was based on your environment.
Yes, sir.
And your vision of what was possible for yourself was basically the surroundings that you lived in and what you were subjected to.
Yes, sir.
And you were not able to see beyond that in terms of a personal vision for yourself.
No.
And then you had a turning point.
Yes, sir.
Where there was an incident in the skating rink that led you to actually move toward becoming a part of a group of individuals that could offer you some protection.
Right.
And that could offer you some way to really have an experience different than what you had had before.
Right.
Right. So now, why do you go back to that one incident? How did that change things for you?
Because I felt like at that, I mean, my anger at being jumped on, being associated with a gang at that point when I wasn't, kind of drove me to like, okay, y'all said I was a vice lord. Y'all said this. Y'all jumped on me. I can't go back home because my mom lived over there. But my mom, I couldn't. My mother was afraid for me to come back to the north side and stay over there. So I had, even though I still went to school over there,
Wow.
I had to go back out west.
Wow.
So that just, I just told my cousins, hey, look, they accused me of being in a gang. I want to join up, and so they took me on the block. And at that time, when we was joining the gangs, we had to get initiated in. And what happened was the guys line up on the side of you or what have you, and it's probably about 20, 30 guys on both sides, and they just punching you in the face and basically jumping you in.
Right.
And if you fell out or you didn't make it to the end of the line, you couldn't be one of the brothers. So I made it.
All right. So let me stop right here and
Yes, sir.
make sure I got your story right, because this is really fascinating.
Yes, sir.
And it really is typical of
Yes, sir.
many of our young people. And it helps us, the viewing audience, and us who are a part of the Street Peace Coalition to understand how our young people get involved in street organizations, and to understand that our young people are not bad or corrupt
sir.
or criminal by nature.
Right.
They have been victim to a certain set of circumstances
Right. Yes, sir.
that lead them into a lifestyle and behavior that the majority of the society kind of looks down on,
Right.
but don't really offer them a pathway out.
Or a solution.
So,
right.
or a solution. So
Right.
you went to Lincoln Park,
Yes, sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
Which is one of the better schools
Yep.
in the city,
Yes, sir.
and you basically lived on the north side. Now, when you were at Lincoln Park, did any teacher try to reach out to you and make an effort to really make sure that you kind of stayed on the right path, or was you just in a structured environment that was really sort of a kind of a cookie cutter approach to dealing with children?
School was interesting. It was we had a good school. Lincoln Park was a good school. It's just that we had a little too much freedom. And I think we took advantage of that freedom in a very negative way. Like I said, we could go out. If I'm not mistaken, they used to call it off campus or whatever. You can go out for lunch or whatever. And unless somebody actually looks at your ID and know what your lunch period was, you could be outside from 3rd period to 7th period, if I'm not mistaken. And so because of that, there was nobody constantly on you to stay focused. Sort of, you kind of just wandered, And school for the most part was pretty easy, It wasn't difficult for me or challenging like that. So I didn't have no need to push myself. I just, I was passing. That's all I cared about.
Yeah.
And
And then before you know it, you find yourself in a certain situation where you had to make a decision as a young person.
Right.
And you had to look out for your own safety and your own security.
Right.
And those kind of decisions basically determine the course of your life for the next 25, 30 years.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So this sort of reminds me of something that I heard President Obama say, maybe, sometime during the time he was the president, where he talked about how young people are faced with certain choices.
Yeah.
And because he lived in an environment where he made mistakes and he had a certain approach to life that led him to make certain decisions, but his decisions were not as serious because of the kind of environment that he lived in. He had room and flexibility to make mistakes and errors.
Right.
But when it comes to our young people, living in an urban context, they don't have that kind of freedom to make mistakes and recover.
Right.
Those kind of decisions that they make can lead to life-altering consequences. And it seems that for you, your life took a different path, right? So why don't we pick up on after you got involved in the street organization, right? Now, which street organization is this?
The Vice Lords, the Unknown Vice Lords, UVLs.
The Unknown Vice Lords.
Yes, sir.
Okay, right.
Yes, sir.
So once you got involved in the Vice Lords, what kind of vision did you see for yourself, and then when did it begin to change for you?
Inside the mob, as we say, I saw myself as, you know, changing things, making the mob stronger. I was strong on the rules and the regulations of the street gang. I knew them back and forth. I knew the laws. I knew what we could and couldn't do.
So now here's you redefining yourself, coming out of school, coming out of structure, finding a new structure, and now you redefining yourself now.
Yes, sir.
And you becoming a different person.
Yes, sir. And I'm determined to be this person that's gonna make headway in the neighborhood, and I'm gonna make differences. I'm gonna make changes, and for the most part, I did that. Certain areas that we were in on the west side, there were not a lot of brothers in those areas, and I did all I could to fight to bring or give us the ability to go through certain neighborhoods where at one point we couldn't. So we fought back a lot of the Maniac Latin Disciples from Augusta. We pushed them back to Division. I mean, we because at one point in Chicago, the Vice Lords, we really didn't have no territory, as we would call it, too much past Chicago Avenue. But we kept pushing back, and we held the Latino community, so to speak, at bay and pushed them across Division. Today, they coming back across Division, and they have consumed most of the west side now. But back in the early '90s, we would push them back. We had pushed them back because, I mean, they whole thing was gangbanging, and they were big on that. And so we were in gangs, but we wasn't big on trying to fight someone that we considered our opposition. We would only fight someone if it was over territory or drug turf or something like that. So it was a little different.
So a lot of the beefs or squabbles was over drug territory?
Most of them. Outside of the foolishness and people, fighting over the women or whatever and stuff like that, yeah. Most of the issues were over territory, drug territory, and stuff like that.
So then, for a community that has an unemployment rate of over 50% of young people, it seemed as though drug sales and drug trade was a very big commercial enterprise.
Yes, sir.
For you and other individuals who were involved in gang activity. So how much of the drug business was driving the gang activity that you were involved in?
Over 50% of it. Back then, you had people making roughly anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000 a day on drug spots, literally, and I'm not exaggerating. They were literally making that that amount of money. I mean, there were lines and lines of people lined up on a daily basis waiting for us to come back out there with drugs. So it was very big. I mean, it was very big. A lot of people. I mean, that was one of the biggest things. I mean, and yeah, I mean, at the time, I know that I could make on average, and I was a small, considered a very small drug dealer, so to speak. I know that I could make on any given day at least $10,000 to $20,000.
Wow.
Yeah, on average, and I actually, when I was out there selling drugs, I actually was afraid of the level of danger to sell heroin. I only sold cocaine, so I wouldn't. The drug that was the most popular, I wouldn't. I refused to try to sell it because of the violence and all of the stuff that was going on. The risk you were taking to sell it, I'll say it that way. It was a serious risk. Some guys right on the next block from me were always selling heroin, and I mean, like every other day they were getting stuck up or shot or this or that. But my customer base was a little different because a lot of them were working people, bus drivers, electricians, plumbers, stuff like that did, smoked rocks or whatever you want to call it, but they wasn't provoked to violence to obtain the drugs. They had employment, but the heroin, young people when I was coming up, young people were big on being stuck on heroin, and the drug had a physical addiction.
You had a different clientele, basically.
Basically, yeah.
And the clientele wasn't as violent.
No, not as heroin.
Right.
Nowhere near.
Not as heroin.
No.
Huh. I mean, this is very insightful, and it gives our viewing audience an inside look as to what's going on in the neighborhoods and the problems and challenges that we have as a city and a society. And not only do we have to deal with young people who are lured to this kind of life, but we also have to begin to ask ourselves the question, what is the desire or the need for the American people to have an appetite for drugs?
Yeah.
Because as you very cogently laid out, your clientele was people who were professionals, who were working class, who had stable jobs.
Yep.
But it seemed as though they also had some challenges in their life that made taking drugs a little bit more easier to deal with.
Yeah.
Right? So we only have 5 minutes left. One of the things I want to do is to invite you back because I really want to get more into your life, Brother Ernest Muhammad.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And then begin to talk about really what you did in that life, making all that money, and then also talk about the turn.
Yes, sir.
When did you pivot
Yes, sir.
and begin to change your life?
Yes, sir.
And then how you got involved with the Street Peace Coalition and what you're doing now
Yes, sir.
to really ensure that our young people have better options and alternatives than the kind of way you came up, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So again, we want to invite the viewing audience to visit our Facebook page, Street Peace Coalition. You can catch up with us there. You can also visit us on our website, www.streetpeacecoalition.weebly.com. We are now wrapping up this segment with Ernest Muhammad. It's been very, very intriguing, fascinating life. He is a member of the Street Peace Coalition, and he's been talking to us about growing up in Chicago.
Yes, sir.
And coming up on the rough side of the mountain.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes,
and
sir.
what he's doing now to really help and intervening in some of the conflicts and issues that we're facing in our community and trying to make our neighborhoods safer and our blocks a little bit more comfortable and better to live in.
Yes, sir.
So Brother Ernest, we want to actually give you time to really talk about your perspective on what do you think some of the difficulties that young people face in trying to resist gang activity, since you have gone down that path before. And then we're going to invite you back next week for part 2.
Okay.
So you can talk to us about the rest of your life and how you were able to come out of it. But why don't you give us a closing statement in terms of what do you think young people are facing based upon what you face as a young person?
I think that they need equal opportunity, and I think that there needs to be, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, take a clean glass and a dirty glass and sit both of them on the table, and a person with common sense will pick the clean glass. Well, if you take our young people and present to them the different things that they could, in the different directions they could take their life in, and the resources in which they can utilize to actually be able to accomplish that, in most cases they'll naturally choose this over that. It's not really that difficult. It's just that in the neighborhood and in the hood, you don't see the resources. They're there, but nobody is going out and communicating with the people in the streets and saying, hey, they got a job fair down there. They got, so some resources are there, but
and the dirty
we're
glass is
blind
always present too for them to choose.
Exactly.
Always.
I mean, actually, it's to the point where there is no alternative, or they don't know of the alternative at all. Right. So it's a dirty glass or a dirtier glass.
And the dirtier glass is almost always more visible.
Exactly.
In the ghetto or in struggling neighborhoods than the clean glass.
Exactly.
Oh, all right.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So we want to thank Brother Ernest for being our guest.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And we also want to thank our viewing audience for tuning in again to the Street Peace Coalition. You can catch us every Tuesday evening, 7 p.m. right here on CAN TV. I want to put a plug in again for our Facebook page. You can reach us on Facebook, and you can also catch us at our website, Street Peace Coalition at Weebly.com. Thank you once again. My name is Johnny Muhammad, and hope to see you again next week. Bye.